I feel bad. I have failed you as a reviewer. See, I haven't done this since Crawl, but I had trouble getting to sleep last night. And Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, kept running through my mind, because that's a movie that's hard to forget no matter how much you try. And there are a couple of issues I wish I had brought up in the review that I didn't. I'd had a bad headache all week. It had been so long since I'd seen the movie that I was shocked by a lot of the stuff that I'd blocked out. I can give you excuses all day long, but I failed you. I'd like to address a couple of those issues now. Ilsa's stated reason, and the reason we have a plot for her torture, is she wanted to prove, scientifically, that women can handle pain better than men. That's our entire plot. And it's our excuse for seeing all of these women tortured throughout the movie, except she goes on and on about medical research and scientific progress. Honey, I took science in high school, and I feel like that qualifies me to tell you you're doing it wrong. Because at no point does she torture men. And at no point are any objective measurements taken. It's, wow, look, that woman's suffering so much pain. No man could ever do that. Did you try? I mean, obviously it's a horrible experiment. I'm not encouraging this kind of behavior, but if her reason for these horrible, horrible things is to prove a scientific principle, then you should possibly prove it using scientific methods. Control groups, double-blind studies, other buzzwords. You should have metrics by which you measure each gender's ability to handle different types of pain. And then you could prove it. Because when she brings the general down, it's, look at all the pain she's suffering. No man could do that. That's her proof. You didn't really need multiple test subjects for subjective evidence. One would do ya. Second, nothing that happens in this movie matters. I mean, think about it. What little plot there is for sympathetic characters, for likable characters, is American man and his cohorts overthrowing the Germans and taking control of the compound. The movie spends a little bit of time on this plot when it's not busy with torture porn. Except, literally within minutes of them taking control of the compound, the German army comes in and kills everybody. And the German army did not show up in response to the takeover. The German army showed up because after the general got peed on, he was done with that camp and wanted it exterminated so the Allies wouldn't find out what kind of horrible experiments were being run. So it didn't matter if our heroes succeeded and took over the camp. They were all going to die either way. They didn't even get more life out of it. Not one of them lived 1 second longer than they would have otherwise. In fact, since they were out and in prominent positions when the German army showed up, you could argue that by taking over the camp, they shortened their lifespan by minutes. It never shows how American man and his girlfriend get away. How they dodge past the German tanks, blocking the only way in and out of the camp. Never shown. I guess we just needed a happy ending. And in furtherance of this idea that nothing that happens in this movie actually matters, there's an entire subplot I didn't show you. And it's pretty simple. One of the girls that shows up turns out to be very stubborn. And she makes a point not to yell or respond to pain, because she's got a fiery spirit. So Ilsa, of course, makes her her new favorite torture pet. And by the end of the movie, she's unrecognizable as human. She is a pile of strawberry jam. And she's the one that Ilsa shows to the general to say, see, no man could survive that because she's still alive. And at the end, before the German army shows up, but after the prisoners have begun their takeover, Rosette is the girl's name. Rosette despite not looking human anymore, somehow manages to get out of her shackles and get all the way to the commandant's tent. Because you remember near the end, Ilsa's tied up. So she comes into Ilsa's room with a knife and goes to kill Ilsa. And dies right before she can. She dies and collapses on Ilsa. The knife never touches Ilsa. And lays there until the German officer comes in and shoots Ilsa in the head. I don't know what the point of that was either. Part of why I didn't bring it up is because it didn't matter. There was no point. The other reason I didn't bring it up is I really can't show you. Well, I could, I don't want to. I don't want to show you what she looked like for half the movie. This movie really was just torture porn. That's all it was, because what little plot there was doesn't matter, and honestly was probably tacked on near the end. And then they slapped that screen at the beginning to try and give it some culture, to try and give it some depth. This movie is a vehicle for watching women in pain. Now, I tracked it down because I'd heard it was awful, and I watched it because it was awful. And I watch bad movies. That's why I own the box set, is I heard how bad it was, so I went out and bought the box set and watched them, and they're just awful. There's nothing redeeming to this one at all. And I hesitate to say this about anything, because it's not the kind of person I am. But this movie has no right to exist. Anyway, I wanted to bring up those points. And I'll leave you with one final thought. That face that Ilsa makes when she's peeing on the general, that tortured, horrible face, I like to imagine that that's the look of her realizing that this is the role she's going to be known for the rest of her career. See you guys next time.